Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And today's show is about organ donation and organ transplants. So my first guest is Donna Saddam, and she is the recipient of a kidney, and she received that kidney when she was 14 years old. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome.
And my other guest is her daughter, Jennifer Ennis, and she is eternally grateful that her mother did get that transplant, and she is a passionate advocate for organ donation. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so I've never done a show on organ transplant, and I don't know why that hasn't happened sooner, because it's a pretty significant subject.
Yes.
So Donna, we're gonna, you and I talked a little before the show, but I want people to get like your story.
Okay.
So when you were 14, you became very ill.
Yes.
And you found out it was due to a reaction to penicillin.
Right.
And then they told you what?
They told me, well, I was in the hospital. At 14, I thought that was really far from home. I was like 25 miles away from home, and they told me I needed a kidney transplant. I had heard of it before, but I thought it could be a death sentence. I was
Sure.
afraid of dying. Yeah.
How many years ago was this?
44 years ago.
My God, and at 14, but now it's kind of, you hear it talked about.
Right.
But at 14, to me, that sounds like it must have felt like a totally alien concept, and certainly like, I'm going to die.
It did. I felt, I can remember saying to my parents, if I'm going to die, please take me home. I want to die at home.
And what did they say to you?
We cried. I think my mom and dad were both afraid that I could die, but they wanted to trust the doctors. The doctors had said a kidney transplant would be the only way to save my life.
Wow.
If they had sent me home, I would be dead within a week.
Wow.
So they had to put their faith in the doctors and in God, too. They were very faithful.
And that's a lot of faith.
Yes, yeah.
So they tested all the members of your family?
Correct. I have 2 older siblings. My mom and my dad went through all the testing, and anyone in my family could have donated, but my dad being the breadwinner and my 2 older sisters being in school and in college, my mom decided it would be her that would donate. So then she went through extensive testing to make sure she was healthy enough to donate.
Yes. And then, what a decision. It's like most of us never need to make those kinds of decisions that are life-threatening and, for your child. And when you went into surgery, were you hopeful?
Yes, yeah.
That's great.
I had a lot of, my 2 sisters and my dad I knew were in the waiting room. I got to see them before we went in. And our pastor was there.
Wow.
So I did feel like I had the support of a lot of people. And I knew a lot of my neighbors were praying at home for me. Yeah. So I knew I had the support.
That's awesome. And it's really important for people to hear that supporting somebody makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
You may think that it's just something, lighthearted, but it really, so here you are at 14 and it kind of gives you hope. And I think also at 14, death isn't quite that real. There is kind of this youthful
right
ability to switch gears, maybe.
Well, I think what helped me too is when I said to my parents, just take me home, and I think my doctors realized that I needed to go home. So they did allow me to come home for a day where I got to see, and I can remember my mom telling me this later, all the neighbors are knocking on the door. They all knew I was coming home for the day. And she was hesitant to let them in, but she thought, this is what I needed.
Yes.
And now it is exactly what I needed to see all the support.
Yeah, and the familiar, I think it gives you it kind of grounds you. I know I once was in a car accident where in Philadelphia, and the other driver left and the scene, and I wasn't hurt, but I remember my thought at that time, just let me get home. If I get home,
Right.
I'll be all right.
Yeah, home means so much
Yes.
to you. It really
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And I don't think you realize it at 14. You don't realize it until you're put in the position I was in.
Yeah, yeah. So here you are, 44 years later, almost like a walking miracle,
Right.
and you've had to take anti-rejection drugs,
Yes.
but they've kept you alive.
They kept me, from rejecting the kidney. I still have the kidney. It's working fine.
And your mom's still alive.
My mother is still alive. Her kidney has been working great. So you can survive with one kidney.
And what's really great about that, it just kind of makes you aware of how amazing the body is, that it's
adapts.
designed to do that. Yeah,
It
yeah.
adapted for both of us.
So one of the things that you're challenged with now, and there are some side effects to being on that medication and for so long also,
Right.
is that you've started to develop skin cancers.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, I noticed my first skin cancer. They did take it off, and it wasn't a problem, but now I am having more frequent and more invasive skin cancers. But it is an issue, but it's not. I know. I have the procedures done, and I'm fine. Skin cancer is not going to kill me as long as I have it taken care of right away. So I see
What
my
an amazing attitude, because it's not easy, I'm sure.
No.
Having anything cut away is not easy.
Right.
And as you said when we were talking, the latest one, you gave yourself a day to feel sorry for yourself, and then, okay.
Then I accept that I have to have this done. I have to have 2 more procedures done in November and have it done. I'll go back to work and everything will be good.
Yeah. Amazing. There was something I wanted to ask you in there. I'm going to jump to Jen until that thought comes back. Yes, having children. Yes, it just so you got married, and I assume the standard protocol at that point might have been, if you had asked, to discourage you.
Well, interesting. At 14, I never thought about having kids, but when I was told kidney transplant, that was one of my first questions I asked the doctors, and they kind of didn't say yes, didn't say no. And fast forward to 6-7 years later, I met Jen's father, and we got married, and I thought, I'm going to just try it and see what happens. And since Jen, I've had 4 children. They were healthy. I went through the pregnancies healthy.
And you just had to have a high-risk obstetrician.
Yeah, high-risk obstetrician, and I had normal pregnancies.
Miracles.
Yep,
Miracles, miracles.
they're all miracles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your oldest, especially.
So, Jen, yes, first miracle after. So you grew up like this was standard stuff. Your mother had a kidney transplant. Was it talked about? Was it?
As a kid, we used to go to Philadelphia twice a year for her to be checked up with her nephrologist and the kidney doctor and everybody. And it was a fun day. We would all get in the van and go down to the city and, do something fun for the day, whether it was the zoo or whatever it was. So that was just something that we did. And we all knew every 6 months we had to do it. And, it was just part of our lives.
Right.
We didn't really, I don't think, fully understand the kidney transplant and everything that had happened until we were older because we were young. But the older we got, we came to appreciate it more. And the more things that happen in our lives, the more we truly appreciate what our grandmother did for our mother and,
Yes.
What people do for other people every day.
And you had, I think, an uncle who had a double lung transplant?
My mom's sister, actually, her husband had pulmonary fibrosis. He was diagnosed. And then, maybe 2 years after he was diagnosed, I think.
Yeah.
He got the call a week before Christmas that he was going to have, there was lungs for him, and he was going to have a dual lung transplant. So it was amazing. There's stories that he was just a real fun-loving guy, and there's stories that he hopped right up on the operating table and, said something like, "Let's do this," or something.
Right.
He passed away about a month and a half after the transplant, maybe.
It was a little bit longer, maybe 3 or 4 months.
So that was tough.
From complications or?
He had just had a biopsy, and I think as far as the lung transplant was going, everything was fine. I just think it was
Other things,
yeah.
Wow. So, it's like I remember as a kid, there were things talked about, but your parents are just your parents, and, and you don't pay too much attention to all the stories.
Exactly.
But then as an adult, you kind of, realize because you could relate to it in some way. When did it become a passion for you to talk about organ donation?
I think it really started to hit me when my dad died. My dad had a heart attack about 7 years ago, and we were in the room, and a woman came in from the Gift of Life, and we had at that point been told that there wasn't really any hope. So we went and met with the woman from the Gift of Life, and she told us that he was an organ donor, which we had already known. He would always make comments like, if they want it, they can have it, because I can't use it when I'm dead, or, if your mom hadn't had the transplant, I wouldn't have you. So we knew that was something that he wanted, so we made the decision to donate his organs. And all night, they did testing and blood tests, that kind of thing, to try to see who they could match with his organs. And then the next morning we went with him to the OR, and we were able to sit with him and hold his hand until he passed away. And then we, went home, and it was a terrible day, but there's always comfort in knowing that we helped other people that day with his organs, and that's what he would have wanted. So after that, we kind of just made it a team for the Gift of Life walk every year, and we advocate for it on social media and to people that we talk to. If I ever, see somebody's license at work or something like that that's not an organ donor, I try to educate them the best way that I can. It's just really important. You can't take them to heaven, or you can take them to heaven, but you can't use them.
Well, I'm going to read just a paragraph from a letter that Gift of Life sent to your daughter.
Yes.
About her grandfather. But then I want to talk to you more about why people don't engage with Gift of Life.
Sure.
So they said, when they're talking about your father, and they're saying to her, when your grandfather, when he died, your family wanted to know he wouldn't die in vain and leave a legacy reflecting who he really was. Your pop-pop is the hero, was the hero when he died, and saved someone's life by giving them the gift of life. The gift of his left kidney was given to a 65-year-old retired gentleman who was from Pennsylvania. He was diagnosed with severe kidney disease that left him on dialysis 3 times a week. He was no longer able to endure the painful dialysis treatments, and he received this life-saving transplant from your pop-pop. Yeah. So how incredible, for you to hear, but also for your daughter to hear.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, and I'm going to leave this up to both of you, or I'll ask both of you the same question. What do you think is people's aversion to signing up for this?
I think there's a lot of rumors around, or things that are not true around the act of giving an organ donor. Like, people think if you're in a car accident and you get to the hospital and they see you're an organ donor,
they're going to go.
They're going to
harvest those organs.
Exactly. And that's actually not the case. People don't realize that you really have to still be alive, but have a traumatic brain injury or something like that for them to be able to harvest the organs, because they still have to be working. So it has to happen very quickly after your death. It's not something that, they're going to say, okay, let's off him so that we can get his heart. That's not what happens.
How much time?
I think every organ is honestly different, because I know if they're helicoptering in, they have to make sure that when they land and get the organ from the time and then that they get it and then get back in the plane, like maybe somebody from Pennsylvania couldn't get a kidney from somewhere in California because the flight is too long, that kind of thing. So I think every organ is different. So I can't really answer that specifically, but it definitely has to be done quickly.
Right. What do you think is the aversion?
I agree with Jen, but I also think sometimes they think that they're going to have this added expense, hospital expense, and I don't think that's the case either. Is it? That
I mean, you have to pay for it.
yeah, but no, the
Who has to
donor,
pay for
the
it?
Donor.
Oh,
The
yeah.
donor's family does not have to pay, right?
No.
Am I correct?
No, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if it's alive,
Right, like my mother.
like my grandmother, then you have to pay your hospital bill.
Right.
But for something like us, we did not pay for the harvesting of the organs.
But the recipient does, as part of their
As
insurance.
part-
or
yeah,
something.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But they're not putting that expense on
Right.
the donor's family.
Right, right. And so, do you do public speaking about this, or
I haven't gotten there yet. We're still just kind of focusing on educating the community and participating in the walks. And anytime we go somewhere that the Gift of Life has an event, or the Sharing Network in New Jersey has an event, or they have a table somewhere, we always try to participate and go talk to people and share our story as well. People are always so mesmerized that my mom has had a kidney for 44 years. That's not hers, because that's not what the life expectancy is now. But my mom was a child when she got her transplant, so she didn't have time to, have side effects of different things that really cause kidney failure when you're older. So, and she didn't
Okay.
have any other, health issues really, like hypertension or anything like that add to, your body's weakness and that kind of thing. So the fact that she was so healthy when she got the kidney, I think, plays a role in how she's able to still continue on.
yeah? And what do you think? So, any number of people get organ transplants, and everybody reacts differently emotionally. It seems to me that you have a very positive attitude. What is it that you think has helped you get through everything you had to get through?
I think a lot's faith, a support system. I have an extremely strong support system. Even going through the skin cancer now, I have added to that support with my children. But I know I can pick up the phone at any time and call Jen and say, "Oh, I'm down. Help me out
Yes.
here." I have an excellent support system, and I think that's number one important.
Yeah. Have you changed doctors over the years, or have you stuck with?
Interesting. How long ago was it? It was 3 years ago. My original admitting doctor retired. And I was laughing because he was probably the longest male relationship I have ever had. And he retired. I begged him not to, but it was time. And I still go down to the city. I'm down to once a year, but I see a nephrologist in my area. And no, I mean, other than that, primary care has been the same.
So, what would you say to somebody? Two different questions. What would you say to somebody to give them kind of just your support if they know they're facing an organ transplant?
Well, if they're in social media, there are so many groups on social media. And interestingly, I just found this out maybe 2 years ago. And I'm a member of, there's organ transplants group, and that's anybody. There's heart transplants in there, liver transplants, bone marrow transplants. And then I'm also a member of women's renal.
So these are private Facebook groups, so you can share.
Right. I go into these groups. I'm a member of Facebook, and of course, my children are my friends. But if I post something on there, my friends will not see what I post. The only people that will see are members of that group.
Yeah.
Which also kind of makes it, because there are some things that maybe I don't want to share with my kids.
And I think just like, even if you look at 12-step programs, we need somebody who understands our experience.
Right. You do.
What is it you think people don't understand?
I know tired, like my health, I get tired a lot. And I think that's hard for healthy people to understand that, no, I don't want to go out, even though it's only 8 o'clock at night. I'm tired. I don't want to come over. Yeah, I love my grandchildren, but I don't
Right.
want to come over right now. I'm tired. I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest thing for some people to understand, is that you do tire easily.
And what advice or what would you say to encourage people to become organ donors or to consider it?
Just that you can help so many lives. It's not just kidneys, it's hearts. I was actually amazed as being a member of one of these groups, is that somebody in there had just posted they were celebrating their 10th year heart transplant. So it's not like the life expectancy is so low. These people go on for years and years and years, and you're giving them such a better life than
Gift of life.
Yeah, gift of life. Heart, there's no machine. Like kidney, there is the machine. Heart, there's no machine. You are actually giving that person the gift of life.
And I want to ask you another question after Jen. So Jen, you can talk to people about, make a donation, et cetera, and you can talk from the heart because you were born because somebody was willing to give their kidney to your mom. But what conversation do people need to have in order to hear the possibility?
You mean the possibility of giving their
Yeah.
organs? I think it's just important to talk about it at the dinner table or have regular conversation. My dad never sat down with us and said, we need to have this serious conversation about my wishes at the end of my life. He was 8 years old. That wasn't something that we were thinking about. But we knew because he would always say, in passing, well, when I die, if they want them, they can have them. So we knew that that was genuine and that was something he wanted. My kids know what my mom's went through. They knew what my uncle went through. They obviously know what we did for my dad. And we do talk about it, at the dinner table. If there's a question, my daughter, they have superhero every year at school, and she goes as an organ donor. She has a cape and she goes out and she is the organ donor at school because that's her superhero. So I think it's just important to spread awareness and be aware. And people can be live donors. You don't have to pass away to donate an organ, obviously. You can donate your skin for people who have skin cancer, who need like a skin graft. Yeah, sure, absolutely. They talked about doing that for my mom's head for a little while last year, but now it's healing, so they're not going to go that route. But there's lots of different ways to do it, and every little bit helps. So I think it's just important to have that conversation and make people aware, make them aware. There's walks all around, there's runs. We do the walk every year. We have a team. My kids do the walk, their friends do the walk with us. My cousins do the walk, my brothers and sisters. So it's just important to spread that awareness.
Yeah, to me, what it sounds like is creating it as a more commonplace conversation.
Right.
Yes.
So that it's not like this,
Right.
someone's going to leap in and harvest my organs.
Yeah, and I think too, if I can just add that, so they're not hearing this when somebody's dying.
Yes.
In the worst time of your life, when your loved one is dying, then you have somebody there, well, look, can we take their organs? I'm sure they do it in a nice way.
But I think that's really...
That, to me, would be devastating to hear that if I was in that
You're
position.
dealing with... that's a very powerful point to indicate to people, start having this conversation earlier and thinking about it earlier, because at the worst time in your life, somebody's coming and saying, oh, you want to donate?
Right.
Yeah. So we just have a minute or so left. Is there a commonality to what people share who have received, like on your Facebook groups? Is there a commonality, either a common complaint, a common challenge?
I want to I haven't really noticed anything. We all have, well, I'm not in this where wanting to know the donor,
Right.
because obviously I know my donor, but some people don't want to know, some people do want to know. I've noticed some of the people that do want to know, I don't want to say they get upset, but because it's a two-way street.
Yes.
Both sides have to want to know.
Yes.
And they get, they're sad if the donor family doesn't want
Right.
to meet. Now, I have a really good friend who's like best friends with her donor family.
Wow.
And it's amazing to me, like they post pictures, she's babysat for the grandkids, so, but not everybody has that.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that is it makes it more real.
Right.
The whole idea of, I'm giving the gift of life, it's a nice thought, but it's very conceptual.
Right.
And if that's all it takes, great. But you could actually see and connect with, I think that's very
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
And it never dawned on me that would, but it makes sense. Like, where did I get this from? Because let's face it, receiving an organ, now with you it was different, not so different, but you were 14, it was your mom, there was no mystery around it.
Right.
And, but this whole idea, it's an extraordinarily challenging, life-altering experience. So it must raise a lot of emotional stuff and a lot of questions besides the gratitude.
Right, right.
Yeah. So we're at the end of our time. I want to thank you for being here. I want to encourage people, we're going to put the names of the organizations and we're going to put your either phone number or email address where people can contact you if they have any questions they want to ask. But thank you for being here. Thank you for representing an amazing group. And thank you for being an advocate.
Happy
You're
to
welcome.
be. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.